Good evening.
Good evening.
This is a strange good evening, isn't it?
Wonderful.
Huh?
Wonderful evening.
Just imagine. We've been in New York and Portland and Seattle together and London and Australia. And now we're out here in Hawaii. At first you can't believe it. And then when you stop to think it over, it comes really under the heading of a miracle. Well, of course, the details of your own individual demonstration in being here, when you stop to think of those journeys from Australia, from London, from New York, Chicago, Cleveland, California, Florida, that in itself is a miracle. And I'm afraid that if it hadn't been for our good friend and student, Mrs. Locy, all those miracles might not have helped. Because she has put you all to bed comfortably. And that is no mean miracle in Hawaii in the month of August. So we must be truly grateful to her for that part of the work and for the transportation part. I thought we had all of this parking situation cared for. Probably by tomorrow night we will have. But I always knew that there was a possibility of some inconveniences to you in coming out here to this home. We could have made it more convenient by taking a large room at a hotel downtown, but we would have been in all the hurly-burly of Waikiki. And even those of you who are here for the first time realize that Waikiki isn't any more Hawaii. We will have, after we get adjusted to the few inconveniences of travel, we will have peace, quiet, seclusion out here. We have a very serious 2 weeks ahead of us. Because I believe that in recognition of these journeys that you have made from far places here, that we should make a special effort to accomplish more in these 2 weeks than we ordinarily expect of our classwork in 2 months. I think we should do that. I think each one of us should make an effort to go far beyond what you now believe to be your spiritual capacity in order to make this trip worthwhile in every respect. Now, I do realize this, that because you are in Hawaii, and many of you the first time, that you will want some opportunity, and you should have some opportunity, to see this island, and if possible, one or two of the others. But I also recognize the fact that you are not here because it's Hawaii. You have already traveled equal distances to be in Chicago and New York and California, London, Australia. So I know that your being here in Hawaii is part of your spiritual demonstration, and the fact that it is Hawaii is incidental to that. And we will make the spiritual factor the big one, and yet have enough time left over for the joys that you can find here. Truly, Hawaii is unique. There's no other place under the sun that you can visit that will give to you what Hawaii can give you. It has a charm, a climate, a weather, a people, all distinct, all unique, all different than the rest of the world has to offer. And I've seen all the rest of the world where we travel. But this is something different. There's an atmosphere that's entirely different. And while you're here, avail yourselves of it. If it doesn't appear on the surface, that's only because Waikiki has changed in the last few years. Go outside of Waikiki and find it somewhere else, because it's still here in the islands. The islands haven't changed except for that 1.5 miles of waterfront down there. The rest of Hawaii, the spirit of Hawaii, the aloha of Hawaii, all that many of you have found in Nund Landing's books on Hawaii, that's all still here. But it just needs a little bit more searching and finding than when I first came here. So don't hesitate to take some tours or hire cars, get around, and find this great spirit that's here. Now, we're going to cover these 2 weeks of work in this way. The first week of class, we are going to take every facet of spiritual living and see what the essential points are that we must know in order to arrive at a consciousness of harmony. Now, I'll tell you to start off with that there is a tremendous secret that is found only in the literature of the great mystics. And that is this, that when you attain a certain state of consciousness, you live in another dimension of life than the three-dimensional one, and you have experiences totally unknown on the human level of life. And that, after all, is the goal that the world is seeking, even though it doesn't realize quite what that goal is or how to attain it. Perhaps you'll understand it more clearly if I take you back to your initial experience in the metaphysical world, those of you who have come into this work through some form of metaphysical study or worship, Christian Science, unity, some form of New Thought perhaps, Oriental teachings. Go back to your beginning and see if you cannot find that the original purpose was to bring harmony into the lives you were living, harmony which in some measure and in many ways was absent from you. Many came because of physical illness or mental or moral or financial. Others came because of an internal unrest that gave them no peace, regardless of how much outer satisfaction and success they might have had. there was still this inner unrest. And the object of the search was to find something that would remove those discords. Well, now, many of you who've tried that path actually found physical, mental, moral, or financial healing. Some haven't. Some have only found it in a measure. Some have found it completely. But even they have not found what they were seeking, because having attained that health or that supply or that purity, there was still a dissatisfaction. Now, regardless of the way in which you seek your ultimate success and happiness, even if you find it, you will find also that you have not achieved your goal. For this reason, until one finds a conscious contact with the source of their existence, there will be unhappiness, dissatisfaction, incompleteness, regardless of how much health or wealth there is. The reason is this. In the beginning, we were all spiritual beings. We lived and moved and had our being in spiritual consciousness and spiritual awareness, in a spiritual way of life. You find this described in the very first chapter of Genesis, and it's called the Garden of Eden. When man was planted in the Garden of Eden, he found a perfect life, complete life, harmonious life. There was nothing missing. And it was only when a great tragedy took place that man found himself removed from that state of harmony. And the tragedy was this. He learned to call some things good and some things evil. He came to believe that there are some things good and some things evil, and in that belief he removed himself from harmony, from spirituality, from completeness, from perfection. And ever since then, and that experience has been called the fall of man, the Adam man, the first Adam. But ever since then, man has been trying to get back to that Edenic state, has been trying to find his way home again and find his completeness, his perfection, his harmony. And because of this, the world has become filled with teachings of all kinds, teachings meant to help man find his way back. Some of those teachings are very wonderful, and some are very horrible, but they all have as their motive the desire to help man find his way back to his harmony. These teachings have been known as the search for the Holy Grail, the search for God, the search for the Philosopher's Stone, the search for the secret of alchemy. All of these things, the turning of dross into gold, the turning of our evil, negative experiences into spiritual, perfect ones, these constitute the search. Because we are as we are, the search is different for different states of consciousness. Now, ever since this so-called fall of man, we have been divided into three states of consciousness. A material state of consciousness, a mental, and a spiritual. In the beginning, remember, we were all spiritual, and there was only one state of consciousness. Even that spiritual consciousness, when made flesh, was the perfect immortal body, the eternal, harmonious being. But there evolved this material state of consciousness, this mental state of consciousness, and the world, from the time of this fall to the present moment, the world has been living in material and mental consciousness. Very few people in the entire thousands of years that I'm speaking of have achieved spiritual consciousness. Very few. The world, as we know it today, is a mental and physical world. Now, throughout the greater part of these generations, the only thing that was known was the material sense of the world. And men made their living by the sweat of the brow, physically. And everything that man did, he did physically. Even in the curative arts, it was physical healing. Men applied physical power, physical lotions, physical medicines, physical something to physical conditions. That was as far as mankind got for many years. The settling of the questions of human relationships were also settled physically, with bows and arrows, with muskets, with rifles, machine guns, and now with atomic bombs. You see, we haven't risen too far out of that physical universe, even though a great part of our lives are lived in a mental realm. Even so, the mental is still used for the furtherance of the physical. Now here's a little secret for you. The second chapter of Genesis is the story of the mental creation. And it is that part of the world of consciousness in which man has been living. Now in this last century, more of the mental has been revealed. But if you'll notice, in the sense only of having the mental govern the physical. There has been no attempt in that mental realm to remove one into a purely mental realm, merely to have the mental act upon the physical. In these metaphysical teachings, you will remember that it was mind that was always going to control body. And it was the mental thoughts that were going to produce physical harmony, and the mental treatments that were going to produce more dollars, or homes, or companions. Always the mental was going to do something to the physical. And the result of all this has been that even where this has been successful, we have merely had physical harmony mentally produced. In the old days, if there was physical harmony, it was physically produced, but Then it became physical harmony, mentally produced. And out of all that has come the science of right thinking and all these different things, all of which are meant to manipulate the human scene. If you haven't got a home, you catch hold of the right thoughts, and hocus pocus abracadabra, and the home appears. If you haven't the right companion, you do the same thing, just a little mental right thinking, and your old companion goes and a new one comes in. And so with health, if you have a physical discord, just a little bit of right thinking or a lot of it, and holding the right thoughts, and lo and behold, the diseased body disappears and the harmonious body appears. And note that even when this works, and it does often work, even when it does, you are still left with a physical universe, a physical body, a physical home, a physical companion, a physical anything. And the very next day, the discords and inharmonies can start all over again. You just get healed in one part of the body and then another one talks up. You just get supply adjusted and something else pops up. And so it goes from one belief of physical, mental, moral, financial inharmony to another, and always with the same attempt to use the power of the mind to adjust it. Well, let us say this, that we're fortunate that the world has made that much progress, because without that step of mental activity, the mental realm revealed, it would be almost impossible to make the higher step into the spiritual. Now, let us understand, before we go any further, the function of the mind. We all know the function of the body. The function of the body is that of an instrument. It is an instrument that we walk around in. It's an instrument with which we drive our car. It's an instrument with which we go from here to there. It's an instrument that we use for the activity of human life. Rightly understood, this physical body is an instrument of God, and should be and can be made perfectly harmonious. There is no need for the body to deteriorate. There is no need for the body to lose its faculties. We do deteriorate, we do lose them, because we have not yet achieved the secret of how to prevent it, how to delay it, how to reorganize the entire body so that it does become an instrument for our use. Now, the first way to gain control over the body is to understand that the mind also is an instrument. Let no one studying the infinite way ever try to get rid of their mind or to stop their mind or to in any wise depreciate the mind. The mind is an instrument just as the body is, and the mind has its rightful place in our experience. Once we understand that the mind is an instrument, we also understand what it is the instrument of. Because to be an instrument, there must be something governing it, controlling it. There's the point. The average mind isn't controlled. And in these mental sciences, the students try to control it. That's where they make their terrible blunders, because it can't be controlled by man. All those who try to control their mind by willpower by changing their thoughts, end up in a worse condition than they started with, for the simple reason that you cannot control your mind. It has been tried, and there are thousands today trying to control their mind and making nervous wrecks of themselves. The mind is an instrument for something higher than itself, and that self governs the mind and controls it. And when you come to that point, you will find yourself in peace, perfect peace, a peace that passeth understanding. Now, I can show you an illustration of that in a small way. There are people who have attempted to control their bodies physically. You have seen some of these physical culturists who have nothing higher than body or matter with which to control their bodies. They are careful with their foods and their exercise and their bathing, and a great, great care is given to the body, always with the use of physical, material remedies, and sometimes they build, for a short time, exquisite-looking bodies. But all you have to do is look at some of them after a few years and see how they've wrecked it. See how they've mutilated it. Probably some of you saw only a few weeks ago one of these world's most perfect physical specimens, a man who won one of the great prizes at the Olympics, with a body so perfect he can't walk on it. All he can do is shove 1 foot 2 inches in front of himself to get out of his own way. How he ever lies down must be a mystery, or how he gets on his feet after he lies down. But he won all the medals in his class at the Olympics. Such a horrible specimen of a body you certainly wouldn't want not only to own, but even to look at from a distance. And undoubtedly the greatest exponent of the physical body beautiful in America died the most awful, horrible-looking physical sight that you could be called on to witness. Now you see, there is a Bible quotation covering those things. Man shall not live by bread alone. Do not misunderstand me. It is right to eat properly. And certainly the people of this country, of the United States, need to be more careful on that score than the people of any other country, because the food in this country has been more horribly processed, weakened, destroyed than in any other country. Yes, everyone should pay some attention to what they eat and be sure that to the best of their ability they are eating pure foods and right foods. But remember that that's incidental. That is not an object of life. That is incidental. And wherever it is possible for one to be physically active, whether in the form of setting up exercises or the normal routine of their household or business duties, certainly everyone should have some form of physical activity also as a respect due their body. But also remember this, that is incidental. That is not an object of life, it's an incident of life. The object of life is man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. So that while you do bathe your body as frequently as you can, and while you do feed it with the cleanest and most wholesome foods available, and while you do take some form of physical activity, let all of these things be incidental and the great point realized, and that is this. Every word of spiritual truth that becomes a part of your consciousness becomes a part of your mind and of your body. Spiritual truth keeps the mind alive and alert, and in its turn, the mind acting on the body keeps it alive, alert, and under control. You do not control your body, you do not control your mind, but the activity of truth in your consciousness, in your awareness, an activity which, of course, you indulge through your mind, that keeps your mind clear, active, clean, harmonious, vital, and in its turn manages, controls, governs the body. Now please remember, we are not of those who would throw the body out of the window, and we are not of those who would shut off the mind, but we are of those who believe that the body must be kept as clean as the mind, but that the soul, the spirit, the activity of truth in our consciousness is the purifying agent for both mind and body. Man shall not live by bread alone, and that's it. We live by every word of truth, not the word of truth that's in the Bible, not the word of truth that's in a church, the word of truth that is closer to you than breathing, the word of truth that you keep up here in your forehead or bound on your arm or in a pamphlet in your pocketbook, the word of truth that you keep alive within yourself. That is the activity of truth in consciousness, which governs the mind and allows the mind in its turn to influence and govern the body. Now, as we go along in this classwork, please remember that questions are in order. We are here in order to answer the questions that are necessary, and if you will write them out and leave them on this desk, I will take them up the same evening or as quickly as we can get to them. Now, continuing on that same theme, I would like you to know that the mind is not a spiritual factor, and it is for this reason that there are people who earnestly and seriously study different forms of truth and yet seem to make no progress. Their study does not get above the level of the mind. That's not always their fault. We'll come to that too. But this is the answer for almost all of the failure of students of metaphysics, that they come into it on the level of mind and they do not rise above the level of mind, and spiritual truth cannot be known with or through the mind. The things of God are foolishness with man, and man is mind and body. The flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, neither mind nor body. There is a spiritual center in us. That's what Browning referred to. There is a center within us all. And in that center is stored up our entire spiritual heritage, immortality, eternality, life, love, home, infinite abundance. All good is stored up in our spiritual center, in a spiritual center that is within our own being and is not within our body. And no use looking for it here, no use looking for it here. It is not in the body. It is in our consciousness, and our consciousness is not in our body. Our body is in the consciousness. As a matter of fact, I shall put it to you this way: your consciousness is infinite. Your consciousness at this very moment is just as much in New York City as it is out here. Your consciousness is just as much in China or Japan or wherever you would like it to be as it is here, because your consciousness is infinite. And that is why when you have practiced, studied, you will be able to close your eyes, get at peace, and find yourself in the body, out of the body, or wherever you would like to be. And you can draw out of infinity, out of the infinity of your own consciousness, the place whereon thou standest is holy ground. Out of the infinity of your own consciousness, you can draw all that is necessary for your unfoldment from this day unto the end of the world and beyond into infinity. In other words, if you were an artist, an author, musician, composer, creator of any kind, except for studying the particular skill, you do not have to go out of the chair, out of the place in which you're sitting, to draw forth all of the ideas that you will need unto infinity, eternality, immortality, or to the end of time. Right where you are is holy ground. Right where you are, God is, infinity is. And you learn to close your eyes, and in time you'll find, with the practice of meditations, that the moment your eyes close and your body gets at peace, your mind gets at peace. It gets still. And it becomes an instrument through which everything necessary for your unfoldment can flow. If you need an idea of music or an idea of a story or an idea of some art, literature, regardless of what it is that you need, the very moment that your mind and body become still, there is that within your consciousness that begins to flow out. And again, it was Browning who said it to us, that this infinity of good flows out from you. It does not flow into you. Now, many people are sitting around waiting for supply. Others are waiting for other forms of good. Some are waiting for health, as if they could come to them. They can't come to you. There's no use waiting. When you have found your inner stillness, your health and your supply and your infinity of good will flow out from you. Oh, out in the world it will still appear to come through what we call some normal, natural channel. But you'll know that it isn't. It isn't any more normal or natural. It isn't any more humanly done than you 100 people sitting here in this room out here in the middle of the Pacific. That's a spiritual activity and a miracle. There was nothing human about it except the way it unfolded after you opened your consciousness for the experience. And do you not, each one of you, know that if you had not opened your own consciousness for the experience, that you wouldn't be here? Certainly, there are some so close here that just for a little car fare they can be here. Bus fare over the Poly. In some cases that may not be demonstration. There are others of such wealth that they only had to write a check and be here. But that's few. Almost everybody in this room that has come from a distance had to, first of all, open their consciousness to the experience. You might call it desire it. But desire it or not, you had to open your consciousness and say, Father, of my own self I can do nothing. I haven't the human means or time or conditions in the household that would set me free for those weeks. And so you had to open your consciousness, and then bit by bit the pieces fell into place. And then you found yourself here. So it is with any phase of our lives. If we want to know what to say at a lecture, if we want to know what to paint or how, if we want to know how to do this, that, or the other thing that is necessary in our experience, first of all, we open our consciousness, and then something begins to flow into the mind, and then through the mind, the body. So you see that the mind and the body are very necessary to our unfoldment, and let no one belittle them. Only let no one over-exaggerate their importance and believe that they can get along with a mind and a body without the aid of the soul or the spirit or that which we call truth, a principle, a law, or God. Now, the mode and manner of its operation we will come to, not this moment. Right now, I would like to call this to your attention. As you know, the main object of the entire Infinite Way experience is to lead our students to a conscious realization of God. Well, of course, that sounds very beautiful, and at first hearing, almost everybody agrees that that's what they love to have. It isn't true. More people run away from the experience when they get close to it than remain with it. For this reason, that nobody knows what the Spirit of God will do to their lives when it touches them, because it never leaves them where it found them. It always breaks up old patterns of life and reveals new ones. And those who get hurt, and some do, are those who are insistent that the old patterns stay only a little more harmoniously. And spirit doesn't work that way, and that's why on this path you will meet with those who have lots of complaint. To actually attain the realization of God means to be put back on the spiritual path that God ordained for us in the beginning before we were created in the womb. And as you know, we are not all living that particular life. We may be living discordant lives, and some may be living very harmonious ones on their human plane. But that is not necessarily the spiritual path that was ordained for them in the beginning, and unless they're willing for the old patterns to be broken, they are apt to be broken on this wheel. Now, part of our work from the beginning concerns the subject of spiritual healing. Now, there's a reason for that in my particular experience, and probably yours. When my first spiritual experience came to me, I was not seeking healing as such. Oh, on the day when I had the experience, I was seeking a healing of a cold. But I mean, aside from that, I did not have healing in my mind as an object of my study and search. what I was seeking for was some kind of an inner peace or satisfaction, because I had enough of the outside kind and not enough of the inside. And I didn't know what it was that I was seeking, and assumed that my mother was right when she told me that I was looking for God. On this particular day when the experience happened, I was ill with a cold, and I was expecting a healing, and I received it. But the motivating thing within me wasn't seeking healing, it was seeking God. But the strange thing that took place in my life was that, within 36 hours after my first spiritual experience, a woman, buyer, customer of mine, said that if I would pray for her, she could get healed. Well, the only prayer I knew at that moment was, "Now I lay me down to sleep," and I couldn't see where that was going to do much healing. But she insisted that if I would pray for her, she could get healed, and there was nothing for me to do but pray. And so I closed my eyes, and I'm happy to say this, I've always been honest with God. I said, "Father, you know that I don't know how to pray, and I certainly know nothing about healing. So if there is anything, tell me." And very, very clearly, as much so as if I were hearing a voice, I realized that man isn't a healer. And that satisfied me. That was the extent of my praying, but that lady had her healing. Now, it was the very next day when a traveling salesman came to me and said, "Joel, I don't know what your religion is, but I do know this, that if you'd pray for me, I could get well." What are you going to do about it? Argue? No. Let's close our eyes and pray. And I closed my eyes and I said, "Father, here's another customer." But while my eyes were closed and nothing was happening, he touched me and said, "Wonderful, the pain is gone." And so that was a daily experience, not only once a day, but eventually it got to be, 18 months later, my business associate said to me when I came in one morning, "You've had 22 telephone calls and not one from a customer." And so I left his office, and I went uptown and I engaged an office as a healer. I've been at it ever since. And that is why healing plays an important part in our message of the infinite way. Remember this, healing is not our main object. I not only don't want to set up with Materia Medica, but I would, as a competitor of Materia Medica, but I would like to say this, that I'm convinced that within 25 years, Materia Medica will have found the answer to every physical disease now known. And there will be no more need for metaphysical practitioners so far as healing work is concerned. But I don't think that's going to put us out of business, because I do not think that with all their physical healing that they will be able to reveal man's soul to him, and that will be our function. For man will find that even when he has no physical, mental, moral, or financial discords, that he still has an inner unrest. He will still not be at peace with himself, and that will be our function. But until such time, one of the proofs of the effectiveness or the nature of our lives when we make God contact is healing work. When we really make contact, healing automatically follows. And it is for that reason that healing plays a part in our experience, because it will lead us beyond the need for healing. And that's what I want to illustrate. Spiritual healing is not faith healing. It is not based on anybody's faith in anything. Nobody has to believe in anything to be spiritually healed. You don't even have to believe in God. As a matter of fact, I am convinced that the belief in God stops more healing than it ever brings about. Because a belief in God is far, far, far from an understanding or experience of God. And belief is far, far, far from our spiritual home. Now, the mind is not a factor. The mind is not an agency for spiritual healing. And it is for this reason that students do not go far enough and therefore do not receive the healing that they're seeking. It is true that the mind plays a part as an instrument in this wise. Without my mind, I would not be able to say to you that there is no God that heals disease. I must use my mind to make that statement. And if you haven't a mind, you can't hear it. So that you need the mind to take in what I'm saying to you. And you'll need the mind later to bring it back to your conscious remembrance. But one of the functions of your mind is going to be to help you remember that you are not to look to God for a healing, because there is no God that heals. If there were, God would be a monster. If there were a disease in this world and a God knowing about it and not meeting it, wouldn't that be terrible? That would be like you lacking something your mother could give you and your mother sitting around not doing it. You wouldn't love your mother very long. No. No, the first thing you have to understand is that you are not going to God for your healing. You're going to God for the experience of God. Because once you have the experience of God, everything of a negative nature begins to disappear out of your experience. It may go bit by bit. In some cases it goes suddenly, quickly, instantaneously. At other times slowly. But from the moment that you make contact with God, the discords of life begin to disappear. And so it is that you can't go to God for healing, and don't believe that you can. Those statements in books that God healeth our diseases and that we pray to God and God answers our prayers, that's a manner of presenting truth to the ignorant in some way that the ignorant can begin to catch some kind of an idea. In other words, I suppose it would be something like teaching a kindergarten class. I don't suppose you could start out teaching a kindergarten class much about the truth that they're going to learn later in school or high school or the university. And so you start them off with some kind of little sap or pap and lead them on gradually to the place where they can begin really to take the truth. So it is that ages ago, the Master, Christ Jesus, taught his disciples truths that he found impossible to impart to the multitudes. He healed the multitudes, but evidently he didn't teach many of them very much. He gave them some simple things, but he couldn't give them the meat of the word. That's referred to in Scripture too, to give milk to the babes, meat to those that are prepared to receive it. I have many things ye cannot bear. O Jerusalem, I would, but you couldn't accept it. That's what I'm referring to. The fact that we can say to beginners whom we meet who are suffering, have you ever tried God? Don't you know God can help you? And with those gentle little sweet nothings, we lead them on. But as you become students, it must be clear to you that there can't be a God anywhere in heaven or on earth allowing you to suffer until you find the right words or the right teacher or the right practitioner, and then all of a sudden God's going to let loose some healing for you. That isn't even pretty to contemplate. And so you find through your mind that the Master meant what he said when he said, "Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." There isn't a word there about saying prayers or going to God or having faith. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Now, in the Master's revelation, you have two distinct teachings. And when you, through the mind, begin to comprehend those teachings, you develop that spiritual center within you. You develop a spiritual consciousness, a soul faculty, and then all of a sudden the avenues are open through which spiritual harmonies can flow. Now, it isn't likely that spiritual centers in you are going to be open through any blind faith, nor through any physical or mental exercises. But knowing the truth, even mentally, and consistently, regularly, steadfastly knowing the truth, will develop that spiritual consciousness, which not only will make it possible for you to be healed, but will also make it possible for you to heal. Now, you will not heal through the letter of truth, but through the letter of truth you will lift yourselves into the actual atmosphere or consciousness of truth, and there harmony does flow. Now, you see, the answer to all this is this. You do not, through God, get healing, nor do you get supply, nor do you get companionship, nor do you get a home. The only thing that you get through God is the actual experience of God awareness. That's what you get. You get the experience of God, the feeling of God's presence. When you have that, that Word becomes flesh. That Word of God, that feeling of God, that experience of God begins now to flow as harmonious body, harmonious purse, harmonious business, harmonious home. Therefore, watch. Now, mark this well. Watch that you are not using God as a way station to getting something that you want, because you'll miss the point entirely spiritually. Let me say that the metaphysical term using truth is itself an untruth. No one can use truth. Truth is infinite. Truth is God. And it isn't given to man to use God. It is given to God to use us. We become an instrument for God. We become an instrument that God can use. We become an instrument through which and as which God can appear. But let not any one of us think that we can use truth or that we can use God. But we can open ourselves and let God fill us with itself or himself, as you will. Here is your first important point. Never, never for a moment believe that you are going to God for something, or else you will be just using God for a servant or a tool or an instrument. And God isn't that for you at all. We are the servants of God. God is not our servant. We are the instruments through which God can manifest its glory. The heavens declare the glory of God. The earth showeth forth the firmament, and man is the highest expression of God's own being. But remember, it's God's being that's flowing out as us. It isn't we glorifying ourselves with God. It's God glorifying itself through us. Now there's a clear, clean way to remember this. And that is, every time you think you're going to God for something, check yourself and ask yourself, what do I think of God? Is God my servant, my tool? Is God supposed to do my will? Or am I supposed to do God's will? Am I supposed to influence God, or is God supposed to influence me? And then make yourself empty. Empty, just as empty as an old empty potato sack, and let God fill you. Just get empty. Don't try to influence God. Expect nothing of God. Want nothing of God, except that God fill you full of himself. And then you'll find what it means to live spiritually. You'll learn what it means, nevertheless, not my will, thy will be done. And then you'll see what it means not to try to make a demonstration with God.